The Galactic Council chamber floated in the void between stars, a magnificent structure of crystalline spires and quantum-locked platforms where representatives from 400 civilizations gathered to witness humanity's formal evaluation. Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood in the judgment circle, her dark eyes calm despite the weight of 200 billion human lives resting on her shoulders. Around her, holographic displays flickered with data streams, each one measuring, calculating, and categorizing her species according to protocols established over 10,000 years of galactic governance. Commander Theon of the Vraxian Empire leaned forward in his suspension pod, his 4 crimson eyes gleaming with what Elena had learned to recognize as amusement among his kind. Preliminary scans complete, his translated voice echoed through the chamber, each word dropping like stones into still water. Physical strength, Class 7, bottom quartile. Natural weapons, none. Exoskeleton durability, non-existent. Telepathic capability, 0. Energy manipulation, 0. Radiation resistance, laughable. He paused, mandibles clicking in what might have been their equivalent of a condescending smile. By every measurable standard, humanity ranks as the weakest spacefaring species ever encountered. A murmur of agreement rippled through the assembled delegates. The Zephrani, beings of pure electromagnetic energy, pulsed with colors that Elena's translator rendered as polite dismissal. The stone-skinned Gormuth, each one capable of surviving planetary reentry without protection, rumbled their concurrence. Even the relatively peaceful Lytherians, whose crystalline bodies could photosynthesize starlight itself, seemed to regard humanity with something approaching pity. Elena's jaw tightened imperceptibly. She had prepared for this, had known that by every traditional metric the galaxy used to measure civilization, humanity would appear unremarkable. Fragile. Weak. She caught the eye of her military attaché, Colonel Marcus Chen, who stood among the observer galleries. He gave her the slightest nod, and she saw something dangerous flash in his expression before he schooled his features back to diplomatic neutrality. However, interrupted a melodious voice that cut through the dismissive atmosphere like a blade through silk. All eyes turned to Councillor Lyra of the Silvari Communion, one of the eldest civilizations in the known galaxy. She rose from her seat with fluid grace, her luminescent skin shifting through shades of deep violet and blue. I propose we examine additional metrics before finalizing humanity's classification. Thekaloen's posture stiffened. The protocols are ancient and proven, Councillor. These measurements have never failed to accurately predict a species' potential contribution to galactic society. Then you won't object to a more thorough analysis, Lyra replied smoothly. Her eyes, large, iridescent, and unsettlingly perceptive, locked onto Elena with an intensity that made the ambassador's breath catch. There was something in that gaze, a recognition that sent an unexpected jolt through Elena's carefully maintained composure. I move that we include assessments of adaptability, problem-solving under pressure, and creative innovation. Furthermore, I request a demonstration of human capabilities in a practical scenario. The chamber erupted into debate. Elena remained still, her mind racing. She had read every available file on the Silvari, had memorized their cultural practices and diplomatic history. They were known as kingmakers in the galaxy, their endorsements capable of elevating civilizations to the Council's inner circles. They were also notoriously difficult to impress, having existed for over 50,000 years and witnessed the rise and fall of countless species. Why would Lyra, of all the delegates, advocate for humanity? The human delegation accepts, Elena heard herself say, her voice cutting through the chaos with surprising authority. Around her, the debate ceased. We welcome any assessment the Council deems appropriate. Thekaloen's mandibles clicked with irritation. Very well. Since the Councillor is so convinced of humanity's hidden potential, perhaps she would agree to design the evaluation personally, something that tests these soft qualities she values so highly. Gladly, Lyra replied, and now her attention shifted fully to Elena, a small smile playing at the corners of her lips. I propose a standard first contact crisis simulation. The human delegation will face a scenario that has challenged even our most accomplished civilizations. They will have 72 hours to resolve it using only resources available to their current technology level. Elena felt her heart rate accelerate, though her expression remained serene. Beside her, the holographic displays began shifting, reconfiguring to present a new scenario. She caught fragments of the setup: hostile environment, failing systems, diplomatic complications, temporal constraints. It was designed to be impossible, she realized. A test that would justify humanity's low ranking and allow the Council to categorize Earth as a protected protectorate, forever dependent on galactic supervision. When do we begin? Elena asked, meeting Lyra-Ether's gaze directly. For a moment, something electric passed between them. Challenge, recognition, and something else Elena couldn't quite name but felt resonate deep in her chest. Immediately, Lyra-Eth said softly, and the simulation materialized around them, plunging the human delegation into chaos that would change the galaxy forever. The council chamber dissolved into a perfect recreation of a frontier space station, and Elena's senses reeled as the simulation enveloped her completely. Alarms shrieked through corridors that now felt viscerally real beneath her boots. The acrid smell of burning circuits filled her nostrils as emergency lighting cast everything in hellish red. Her translator earpiece crackled with panic transmissions in 17 different languages, each voice screaming about cascading system failures, environmental breaches, and an approaching debris field that would tear the station apart in exactly 72 hours. Colonel Chen materialized beside her, his military training already shifting his posture into combat readiness even as his eyes scanned the chaos with tactical precision. We've got 14 different species trapped on this station, life support failing on 3 decks, the propulsion system completely offline, and what appears to be a brewing civil conflict in the lower sections. He pulled up a tactical display on his wrist unit, his fingers moving with practiced efficiency. By conventional metrics, we'd need at least 2 weeks and a full engineering crew to even attempt repairs. Through the observation plane that separated them from the watching council, Elena could see Thicken's satisfied posture. The Vraxian commander had already dismissed them as failures. Most of the other delegates wore similar expressions of polite expectation for humanity's inevitable surrender. Only Lyra-Eth watched with different eyes, leaning forward slightly, her luminescent features arranged in an expression Elena was beginning to recognize as intense curiosity. "They expect us to fail," Elena murmured, her mind already working through variables, possibilities, and the particular human talent for turning disasters into opportunities. "They've designed this to be impossible using their conventional approaches." "Then it's fortunate we're not conventional," came a new voice. Dr. Sarah Okonkwo, humanity's chief scientific advisor, appeared from a side corridor with her tablet already displaying schematics she'd somehow accessed in the 30 seconds since the simulation began. "I've analyzed the station's design. It's a Vraxian heavy-class platform, over-engineered and redundant to the point of inefficiency. They've simulated 17 catastrophic failures simultaneously because they assume any advanced civilization would have specialized technicians for each system." Elena felt the familiar electricity of a plan forming, the same instinct that had carried humanity from caves to stars in an evolutionary eye blink. "But we don't specialize. We adapt." "Exactly," Sarah's eyes gleamed. "Their protocols require certified experts for each repair. Our protocols require creative problem-solving and the willingness to make things work with whatever's available." She pulled up another screen. "There's a pattern to these failures, Ambassador. They're not random. Someone sabotaged this station, and they're still here, watching to see if we'll figure it out." Chen's expression hardened. "A test within a test. They want to see if we blame the failures on incompetence, or if we recognize malicious intent." He was already moving, gesturing to the other human delegates who'd joined them in the simulation. "Thompson, Rodriguez, I need you to start talking to the different species groups. Not official diplomatic channels. Just talk to them. Share resources. Build trust." Elena watched her team disperse with practiced efficiency, each one moving with purpose while the simulated station continued its death spiral around them. She became aware of Lyra-Ether's gaze intensifying from beyond the observation barrier, and when she glanced toward the Sylvari counselor, their eyes locked. The connection was immediate and unsettling, as though Lyrareth could see directly into the calculations spinning through Elena's mind. The counselor's lips curved slightly, and she inclined her head in what might have been approval or challenge. Within the first hour, the human approach became clear to the watching council. Where other species would have established hierarchical command structures and jurisdictional boundaries, the humans simply started fixing things. Dr. Okonkwo jury-rigged a failing oxygen recycler using components from a food synthesizer and what appeared to be stripped wiring from a gaming console. Colonel Chen organized mixed-species work crews not by capability ratings but by who happened to be near which emergency, and somehow his calm authority transcended the language barriers that the simulation had built in as obstacles. Elena herself moved through the crowd of simulated refugees with an approach that made several council members shift uncomfortably in their seats. She didn't issue proclamations or establish formal protocols. Instead, she listened. She sat with a Zephrani family whose energy matrices were destabilizing in the failing environmental controls and held their containment vessel steady with her own hands while Sarah rerouted power. She shared her own water ration with a young Gormouth who was separated from his creche. She made eye contact, learned names, told stories that made frightened beings laugh despite their circumstances. Impossible, Then muttered from his observation point. They've only had 12 hours. The structural integrity fields should still be failing. But they weren't. Because 6 decks below, a human engineer named Marcus Webb had convinced a Lytheran crystal singer and a Vraxian metal shaper to combine their abilities in a way neither species had considered possible. The Lytheran's resonance frequencies, guided by human mathematical models, allowed the Vraxian to manipulate the station's superstructure at a molecular level without the conventional tools the simulation had denied them. They're teaching the species to work together, Lyrareth observed quietly, and there was something in her voice that made several nearby delegates turn toward her in surprise. Not commanding. Not organizing. Teaching. Her eyes found Elena again through the barrier, and this time when their gazes met, the intensity of it made Elena's breath catch. There was recognition there, yes, but also something deeper. Respect. Fascination. And beneath it all, the spark of something that transcended species and politics entirely. By hour 48, the impossible had become reality. The station was stable, the debris field had been navigated through a solution involving coordinated gravity manipulation that 3 species swore was theoretically impossible, and the saboteur had been identified, a simulation algorithm designed to activate if humans tried conventional approaches. The human team had bypassed it entirely through methods so unorthodox the program hadn't recognized them as valid solutions. The council chamber was absolutely silent as the simulation dissolved and Elena stood once more in the judgment circle, her uniform torn and stained from simulated work, her eyes blazing with quiet triumph. Across from her, Lyrareth rose from her seat, and the smile on her face was radiant. Assessment complete, the Sylvari counselor announced. I believe we need to reconsider humanity's classification. The council chamber erupted into chaos before Lyrareth had even finished speaking. Thurn rose from his suspension pod with such force that it sent ripples through the quantum-locked platform, his mandibles spread wide in a gesture Elena's translator struggled to interpret but her instincts recognized as fury. One successful simulation does not overturn 10,000 years of proven evaluation protocols, he declared, his voice reverberating through the crystalline spires. The humans demonstrated adequate problem-solving, nothing more. They are still physically weak, technologically primitive, and lack any natural abilities that would make them assets to the greater galactic community. Elena remained in the judgment circle, her heartbeat finally slowing from the intensity of the simulation, but her mind accelerated in a different direction entirely. She watched the delegates argue, saw the clear division forming between those willing to reconsider and those who seemed almost threatened by humanity's unexpected success. The Zephrani collective pulsed with agitated colors. The Gormouth delegation had split into heated debate among themselves. And through it all, Lyrareth stood with perfect composure, her iridescent eyes never leaving Elena's face. Perhaps Commander Then fears competition, Lyrareth said softly, but her voice carried through the chamber with crystalline clarity. The arguing ceased abruptly. After all, the Vraxian Empire has held the primary security contracts for this sector for 3 centuries. If humanity were to be properly classified and granted full council status, those contracts would be open to renegotiation. The accusation hung in the air like a charged particle. Thekaloen's entire posture shifted to something dangerous, predatory. You overstep, Counselor. My concerns are for galactic stability, not economic interests. Then you won't object to a formal challenge, Lyrareth replied, and now she descended from the delegate platform, moving with liquid grace toward the judgment circle where Elena stood. As she approached, Elena felt that strange electricity again, stronger now, like standing in the moment before lightning strikes. I propose humanity be granted provisional council status, with full evaluation to occur during their first assigned mission. Provisional status requires a sponsor, interjected High Chancellor Mordek, the ancient being whose species had founded the council itself. His voice was like grinding stone, weighted with millennia. Are you prepared to stake your civilization's reputation on these untested humans, Councillor Lyrareth? Lyrareth stepped into the judgment circle beside Elena, close enough that the ambassador could feel the subtle warmth radiating from her luminescent skin, could catch a scent like ozone and midnight flowers. I am, she said, and then she did something that sent shocked murmurs through every delegate present. She extended her hand toward Elena in the human gesture of partnership, her eyes holding a challenge and an invitation that made Elena's pulse race for reasons that had nothing to do with politics. Elena took her hand without hesitation, feeling the strange tingle of Sylvari bioelectricity dance across her skin. Humanity accepts sponsorship and whatever evaluation the council deems appropriate, she declared, her voice steady despite the warmth spreading from where their hands connected. So be it, Mordek announced. Humanity is granted provisional council status under Sylvari sponsorship. Your first assignment will be transmitted within the solar hour. His ancient eyes swept across both of them with an expression Elena couldn't quite read. I suggest you don't make us regret this decision. The council session dissolved, delegates departing through quantum gates and fold space portals, but Elena barely noticed. Lyrareth still held her hand, and now that they were no longer the center of attention, the Sylvari councillor's expression had shifted into something softer, more personal. That was either very brave or very foolish, Elena said quietly, acutely aware of how close they were standing. I've lived for 3,000 years, Ambassador Vasquez, Lyrareth replied, her thumb tracing an absent pattern across Elena's knuckles that sent shivers up her arm. I've learned to recognize potential when I see it. Your species is remarkable in ways the Council doesn't yet understand. Ways I'm only beginning to comprehend myself. She paused, and vulnerability flickered across her features. Also, I find myself unusually invested in seeing you succeed. Before Elena could process the implications of that statement, Colonel Chen's urgent voice cut through the moment. Ambassador, we have a problem. Multiple problems. He strode toward them with a tablet extended, his expression grim. The Council's first assignment just came through, but that's not the critical issue. We're receiving distress signals from the Outer Rim. 14 systems, all under attack simultaneously. Elena reluctantly released Lyrareth's hand and took the tablet, her eyes widening as she scanned the data. What kind of attack? Which faction? Unknown, Chen replied. But Ambassador, the attacking forces are tearing through Council defenses like they don't exist. The Vraxian security fleet has already lost 17 battle cruisers. The Gormuth planetary shields are failing. Whatever this threat is, it's more advanced than anything in the galactic database. Lyrareth moved to look at the display, and Elena felt her entire body tense with recognition. This is impossible, the Sylvari councillor whispered, her face draining of color in a way that made her luminescence flicker. These energy signatures, they match the Devourers, but they were supposed to be extinct. We destroyed their entire civilization 12,000 years ago specifically because they threatened all biological life in the galaxy. Apparently something survived, Elena said, her tactical mind already shifting into crisis mode even as ice formed in her stomach. The data was catastrophic. Entire populations being harvested. Technology that made council ships look like primitive toys. A force that had already consumed 3 civilizations in the time it took for the distress signals to reach the council chamber. The Council will mobilize the armada, Lyrareth said, but there was doubt in her voice. Standard protocol is going to get everyone killed, Elena interrupted, meeting her eyes directly. You've been fighting wars the same way for 10,000 years. Whatever these devourers are, they clearly know how to counter your tactics. An alert chimed on Chen's tablet. Then another. Within seconds, the device was flooded with incoming transmissions. He pulled up the communication channels, and his face went pale. Ambassador, we're receiving requests for assistance from 47 Council delegations. They're not asking for the Council armada. He looked up, shock evident in his eyes. They're asking specifically for humanity. Elena felt the weight of it settle on her shoulders. 200 billion human lives, and now potentially trillions of galactic citizens depending on the species that had been ranked weakest just hours ago. She looked at Lyrareth and saw her own determination reflected in those ancient, iridescent eyes. Then I suppose it's time we show the galaxy what humanity really is, Elena said quietly. Outside the council chamber, stars were already dying, and the countdown to galactic extinction had begun. 3 months. That's how long it took for humanity to do what the Galactic Council couldn't accomplish in 12,000 years of advanced civilization. Elena stood on the bridge of the UNSC Determination, watching the final Devourer hive ship collapse into itself as human-designed quantum torpedoes tore apart its dimensional anchors. Around her, a fleet composed of 17 species executed maneuvers that would have been considered suicide runs by conventional tactics, yet resulted in 0 casualties and complete mission success. In the captain's chair, Colonel Chen coordinated the attack with the calm efficiency that had become humanity's signature in this impossible war. Final target neutralized, reported Lieutenant Commander Park from Tactical. All Devourer forces in this sector have been eliminated or are in full retreat. Elena allowed herself one moment of relief before accessing the communication array. Across the view screen, 47 Council worlds appeared in a grid, each one showing leaders who 3 months ago had dismissed humanity as irrelevant. Now those same leaders looked at her with expressions ranging from awe to something approaching fear. On the Vraxian homeworld, Theon stood among ruins that human forces had defended when his own empire's fleets had fallen. His mandibles clicked in a gesture her translator now rendered as humble respect. Ambassador Vasquez, he said, and his voice carried none of its former arrogance. The Vraxian Empire formally requests continued human protection. Our defensive networks are shattered. Our tactical databases are obsolete. We are vulnerable in ways we have not been for millennia. He paused, and the admission clearly pained him. We require mercy that we did not show your kind. The irony wasn't lost on Elena. The civilization that had ranked humanity as weakest was now begging for the protection of the species they'd dismissed. She saw similar scenes playing out across every channel, the energy-based Zephrani requesting human engineers to rebuild their containment matrices, the mighty Gormuth asking for human strategic advisors, even the ancient founding species seeking humanity's guidance on adapting to threats they could no longer comprehend through their traditional frameworks. Mercy is what separates civilization from extinction, Commander, Elena replied evenly. Humanity will honor our council obligations and continue defensive operations across all threatened sectors. She paused, letting her words carry weight. But the galaxy needs to understand something fundamental. We didn't win this war through superior strength or advanced technology. We won because we refused to accept that any problem is truly impossible. We won because we adapt, improvise, and find solutions where others see only obstacles. And most importantly, we won because we fight for each other. A new channel opened, and Lyrareth's face appeared on a private screen visible only to Elena. The Sylvari counselor was aboard her own vessel, coordinating relief efforts across the liberated worlds, but exhaustion and something deeper showed in her luminescent features. The council is convening in 1 hour, she said softly. High Chancellor Mordek is calling for a complete restructuring of galactic defense protocols. They want humanity to lead the new security framework. And what do you want? Elena asked, acutely aware of how much had changed between them over these brutal months. They'd worked side by side through impossible odds, shared tactical planning sessions that stretched into personal conversations, stolen moments of connection between crises that had evolved into something neither could deny. Lyra Ether's expression shifted into something vulnerable and hopeful. I want to know if your species' famous adaptability extends to relationships that cross 3 billion years of evolutionary divergence. Her smile was soft, almost shy, an expression Elena suspected few beings had ever seen on the ancient counselor's face. I want to know if you feel this connection as strongly as I do, or if 3,000 years of life has made me misread something fundamental about human emotional responses. Elena felt warmth bloom in her chest despite the exhaustion that made her bones ache. We have a saying on Earth, the heart wants what it wants, regardless of logic or circumstances. She leaned closer to the screen, wishing they were in the same physical space. And my heart has been very clear about what it wants since the moment you challenged the Council on humanity's behalf. Then perhaps after we finish restructuring galactic civilization, you'll allow me to show you the crystal gardens of Silvari Prime, Lyra Eth said, her eyes bright with emotion that transcended species. They bloom once every decade, and I cannot imagine experiencing them with anyone but you. It's a date, Elena replied, the human idiom making Lyra Ether's smile widen with delight. The hour passed in a blur of final reports and coordination. When Elena materialized in the council chamber once more, she stood not in the judgment circle but at the primary podium reserved for senior delegates. The symbolic shift was absolute. Around her, the assembled representatives rose in a gesture of respect that would have seemed impossible 3 months ago. High Chancellor Mordek's ancient voice resonated through the chamber. Ambassador Vasquez, the Galactic Council formally requests that humanity assume primary responsibility for collective security and crisis response. We acknowledge that our traditional methodologies are insufficient for the challenges we now face. We have been humbled, and we seek guidance from those who showed us a better way. Elena looked across the assembled civilizations. 400 worlds, trillions of lives, 10,000 years of history now looking to the species they dismissed as weakest. She caught Lyra Ether's eye across the chamber and saw pride and affection there, saw the promise of futures both political and personal. Humanity accepts, Elena said clearly. But understand this, we don't lead through dominance or superiority. We lead by example, through cooperation, innovation, and the fundamental belief that together, we can overcome anything. She paused, her voice carrying to every corner of the chamber and every world beyond. You ranked us weakest, and perhaps by your old measures, we were. But you're about to discover that humanity's greatest strength was never in our bodies or our technology. It was always in our refusal to accept limitations, our capacity for hope, and our absolute conviction that the impossible is just a problem we haven't solved yet. The council chamber erupted in affirmation, and as the session dissolved into planning for a new galactic age, Elena felt Lyra Ether's hand slip into hers. Outside the crystalline spires, stars burned bright with possibility, and humanity's real journey was only beginning.